Welcome to the EcoExpert Introduction to the Project Configuration Tool. The Project Configuration Tool, or PCT, is a tool that is designed to allow you to configure your full projects completely offline. EcoStruxure building operation servers of all types can be created and will run as virtual servers. You can create the servers at version 1.8, 1.9, or 2.0, and future revisions will be added as they are created. The virtual server operation is identical to live operation in almost all respects, except that some of the plugins are kept inactive to improve the performance of the tool. For example, trends are not gathered while you're running the virtual server. By default, programs are not enabled. However, you can enable them in order to debug programs or to simulate what might happen. Let's take a look at the basic architecture of the PCT and how it relates to the live system. In the large circle at the upper right, we are showing the virtual servers that are running in the PCT. Enterprise servers, SmartX servers, and if you're building a 2.0 project, the Enterprise Central. Although they're not shown in this picture, you can also create virtual field controllers like B3s, Zentas, MNBs, MPCs, etc. The actual configuration of the servers and their objects is accomplished by running EcoStruxure Building Operation Workstation, as shown in the lower circle. And when the configuration is done and it's time to load the project into the live servers, you would deploy the configuration from the virtual world on the left into the real world on the right. So at a high level, you create a project, add and start the servers, log on to the servers with Workstation, do all of the necessary configuration, and then move the configuration to the site. You can make that move by using the deploy command from within the PCT, or simply by taking a backup of the server and then restoring the backup file to the live server. At this point, the PCT is essentially an external tool, not really the servers. There are manual steps that you go through when you build and deploy the project, and we'll go through how you do each of these steps in a little bit in a live system. But essentially, you would define which servers you're going to use. You start the servers, you start the workstation, and then you create or import your objects to build the configuration. Then you decide where and when you deploy, and the deploy process essentially takes the backup of the server and sends it to the live system for restoration. So at this point, it's pretty obvious how big an advantage it is to be using the virtual live server concept. You can learn from an existing site by taking a backup of the AS and then restoring it into the PCT. You can debug your programs and schedules in a simulated environment. Product support can import customer backups into a simulated environment. You can have several different versions at the same time within a single project. It's very easy to scale, and it's much, much faster to deploy than it was within the old project configuration server. Okay, now we've looked at the basic theory of the PCT. Let's get into the details of its installation and its use. First, you would get the software by downloading it from the Exchange, and then proceed to install it. As part of the installation, you will determine what type of installation you have. So we go through a few of the basic install screens here, and this specifies the file locations. We'll come back to that in a second. And then this allows you to choose which type you want. You can either choose a local installation, where the client and servers and workstations are all expected to be on the same machine, or a server installation where the project configuration tool database will be accessible from other computers. For the purposes of this video, we're going to focus on the local installation, where all of the programs will be located on my personal machine. Now, the installation itself will place the files in one of two different locations that will depend pretty much on whether or not the PC under which it's being installed has ever had the project configuration tool installed on it before. And the screen you see here is what I have on my machine, and it shows Schneider Electric Struxureware as being part of the path. If you have never installed the PCT on your machine and the 1.2 version is the first version, then instead of saying Schneider Electric Struxureware, this will say Schneider Electric EcoStruxure. One of the key reasons why you want to determine up front what type of installation you have is because your hardware requirements are going to vary depending upon how you run it. The PCT is a very machine intensive program, And so what we've tried to do here is create a table for you to show what the capacity should be for the different types of operations that you might have, whether it's a client machine, a standalone with different number of projects running, a server machine, again, with different number of projects running and different number of engineers on it, specifying a different processor, different speed, different memories, different hard drive, with the sort of calculation method of the hard drive size provided as well. So the installation itself has a very large footprint, and it takes care of installing the PCT client, the PCT server, the Virtualbox software that's responsible for the maintenance of all the project instances. You'll also need to install Workstation on the PC. That's not part of the PCT installation package. It's a separate instance of Workstation will be required for any of the different versions of projects that you might be creating. A 2.0 project will require a 2.0 workstation. A 1.9 project will require a 1.9 workstation, and so forth. When you run the workstation and log into your PCT virtual servers, it runs in a database-only mode. And the look to it is a little bit different so that you can tell whether you're online or offline, so to speak. Now, the PCT itself does not require a license to operate. However, the workstation software does need a license. So once you've installed the PCT and you start it up, you'll see this login screen for the PCT client to log into the PCT server. The default information will be correct for the standalone version. However, if you're operating the larger client server version, you'd need to click on the setup for use with a remote server option and then complete the screen there to give the settings so that your client can contact the server location. We're going to be doing local throughout this video, so we don't need that screen. We simply would click on OK. Now, when the PCT first starts, it goes through the process of initializing Virtualbox, and you can see it go through its paces up here in the sort of middle of the page towards the right-hand side. The docker.vmdk number will start to scroll up until those two numbers match, at which point it will be done initializing Virtualbox, and it will start to calculate the amount of memory that is available within your system. If this number ever gets over 75%, then the PCT will not be able to create a project or even open a project until you shut down applications that may also be running on the server to allow for that memory to free up and make itself available for the PCT itself. Now, PCT operation requires that hardware virtualization be enabled on the PC. And if it's not enabled, you will get this error message. And it will request that you enable the hardware virtualization in your BIOS before you continue to do that. So then you would shut down your PCT, and then depending upon the machine that the PCT is actually running on, you would go through the steps to enable hardware virtualization. That's a little different for every machine style and manufacturer. I have some screenshots to show you how you would do that in the Lenovo ThinkPad that Schneider Electric has provided for me. And essentially, you start off with getting into the BIOS itself, and most PCs will give you a little message on startup to tell you how to interrupt the normal startup routine, and then provide you with a startup interrupt menu. So in this case, you would enter F1 to get into the BIOS setup utility. That gives you several different options. I happen to know that virtualization is in fact located on the security tab. So I would scroll over to the security tab, select virtualization, and then enable it completely. And then I would press F10, I think it is, to save. So before we go live and step through the process of creating some projects, let's take a look at some of the things that are running in the background and where they're running. First, there's Virtualbox, and you can confirm that Virtualbox is there by going to your programs and opening Virtualbox Manager. When you click on the Virtualbox Manager, you'll probably get a notice about the availability of new versions for download. You need to skip through that. Sometime it may be advisable to upgrade to a different VirtualBox version, but there should be an announcement to that effect. You can pretty much rely on the version that's shipped with the product to be the appropriate one. If there's some reason that you seem to think that you want to upgrade your version of VirtualBox, you should make sure that you have cleared that with the support group before you do it. So in VirtualBox Manager, until you create a project, the manager itself will come up empty. But once you have made a project, then it'll come up and you'll see the PCT and its projects right there. So you can at least confirm, even if the box comes up empty, that VirtualBox has been installed. So the existence of firewall software can also have an impact on your ability to run PCT and on your ability to log into a project with Workstation. The settings for firewalls and VPNs seem to have a great variety even within Schneider Electric. I know at one time I had to turn off my firewall, but now I don't, and I don't have to do anything. But I can show you where to go and what to watch for on some of the next screens here. If you click the up arrow in the lower right of your screen in your taskbar, you'll get the icons of all the currently running programs. You can move the mouse around and look at the tooltips to find the firewall software, which in our case is McAfee. And so then you can click on the McAfee icon, and that will show you many of the features that you can accomplish within there. And if you then select quick settings, you can see right there some of the different things that you could toggle off, not the least of which is your firewall. I know that there is variation even within Schneider Electric in terms of whether or not that firewall has to be turned on or turned off. I have found in the NAM area, I no longer need to turn it off. In those areas that do have to turn it off, you may also find that policies are such that it will turn itself back on after about an hour, and your symptom of that is that the workstation that you're running will lose contact with the servers and you need to go down and turn it back off again. Also within McAfee is an area where you can manage some features, and that basically allows you to exclude certain programs from being blocked. It may perhaps be inappropriate for me to say that you can do that because you would probably have to get an IT administrator to be able to do it. But you can see if it needs to be done on your machine by going to Manage Features and then to the Host Intrusion Prevention. And then on the tab that says Firewall Policy, you can scroll down to get to the Corporate Applications. And then we are at the Corporate Applications. You can expand that and scroll down further until you get to the Struxureware area. And who knows, maybe someday we'll have the branding so far completed, the rebranding so far completed that says EcoStruxure or building operation. But you want to make sure that the client module and the module server are both in this list to exclude from being blocked. And finally, for those of you who may have used previous versions of the PCT or who just sort of fancy looking under the hood to see how things are running, PCT no longer runs as a service. And also, if you look at the list of processes that are running, you'll notice that the individual module names are no longer shown. Everything shows up as EcoStruxure Building Operation Project Configuration Tool 32-bit, which, just to clarify issues, it's a 32-bit applications, but it's only supported in 64-bit operating systems at this time, and we hope to get it up as a 64-bit application eventually. So that's a lot of the background stuff. Let's go live and make a project. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start the PCT, which we do. We get the screen that we discussed a little bit earlier, which shows us the default settings for the local installation, which we are going to proceed with. So I'll just simply click OK. And we get the server startup screen. You'll note we don't get the VirtualBox initialization piece anymore, but we do get the system memory usage and then just the blank basic screen. So let's just take a look at what we've got on the screen. In the upper right, we have the help button, which will trigger the online help and automatically take us out onto Exchange. asking us to log on, which of course we can do. If you are a Schneider employee, you have this lovely little icon that allows you to log in directly with your single sign-on routine, and then this will just simply provide the help screen that's appropriate for. You'll notice that it starts off at version 1.8 because that's the first version for the PCT. You can change it to whatever version you feel is appropriate. So now let's go back to the tool itself. We can see the amount of memory that's being used. Also, if you hover your mouse over the memory block, you'll see some more specifics in terms of what the actual usage number is, as well as the total percentage that's normally being displayed. The projects view is the default starting tab, and then the about tab will provide information on what version you're running. The particular version that we're running now is a pre-release build, so the version that you see will be slightly different than that. So let's go back to the projects tab. You'll notice that the only icon across the top that's not grayed out is the plus sign, and this is what we want to use to create a new project, so I'll select that. Now the minimum amount of information that's needed to create a new project is its name, but there's several other pieces of information that you can provide from this basic view. I'm going to call our project new project. Very creative. But I could have added other things as well. I could have added a description in here. I could have added a project manager if I wanted. These are pretty much just bookkeeping items that are completely optional. I can also change the number of CPU cores that would be dedicated to this particular project, as well as the amount of memory that should be the top limitation for this project. Both of these items can be changed later if you find that the default was not appropriate. The general rule of thumb is to allow roughly 250 megabytes of memory per running server. Now keep in mind that when you're engineering a project, there's no need necessarily to have all of the servers in that project running at the same time. So you don't have to allocate memory equal to the number of servers times 250. So then we can save this project by highlighting it and selecting the disk icon up here. You can notice that the tooltip tells us that that means save project settings. So we select that, and that proceeds to save the project. You can see that the state changes a little bit. You get the symbol of closed in as much as it is just being saved, and then as part of the saving, it will begin to open the project itself. The progress area shows the status when it's moving from one state to another, and then it becomes empty after it is done. Once the project's saved for the first time, it opens up to the servers page. And if for some reason you wanted to review the properties of the project, again, you can simply go back to the projects tab by selecting projects, which is now in the upper right here next to help. If I chose project again, you can see all the information on the projects. Note that the state now shows the open icon. So to get back to the open project screen, you would simply select the project, right click, and choose open again, and that will bring you right back to the project itself. You can see that the amount of memory that's been used by the project itself is also displayed next to the system memory. It'll show as a percentage of the amount that was originally allocated to that project. Again, as with the system memory, you can hover over that box and get the exact specifics of how much memory is being used and the total that was allocated to that project. So let's create a server and see what the fields are that are shown by default. Again, we can create one server by clicking on the plus icon, and the default name is server 01. You could change that to whatever you wanted. We'll just leave it as it is for now. The default type, unless one has been created, is an enterprise server. So any of these items can pretty much be changed simply by clicking in the appropriate field, typing in a new name for the server name, going to the server type, choosing from the drop-down list what type that you want, going to the version, choosing what version you might want of the ones that are available within the PCT template that was part of your original installation. Let's leave everything at default for right now. We can come back to things a little bit later and look at some of the other properties. So we select the server and the disk icon to save the server settings and save it. And you're immediately required to enter a strong password for the admin account. So we will enter that, and I'm not sure what I typed, so I go back and do it again. Confirm it. You'll notice that the OK button does not even is not available until after you've confirmed it and confirmed it correctly. You say OK, and it proceeds to go through the process of creating that server, which includes renaming it from the default, starting it, and shutting it down. So let's take a look at the properties of this particular server by expanding on the Properties tab. The server state pretty much displays in icon format whether the server is running or stopped. The information area here will display any errors that may appear. The operation is similar to what we saw when we created the project itself. It will simply show starting or stopping. It tells you what's going on when you're transitioning between states. The server name is pretty self-evident. This version is the building operations version that is running. The server type is, as you might imagine, enterprise server, enterprise central, ASP, ASB, and the different models of ASB, as well as the very original AS. You have the on-site IP address, which is created by default by the PCT. You have the various port numbers that are associated with it. You have the engineering IP address and ports, which would correspond to the IP address for the live system that's in use when you go to the step of deploying your configuration. You have two optional items. If you recall at the beginning, I said that the various plugins are disabled to improve the performance of the project configuration tool. Well, among those plugins, two are also possible to enable to allow you to do some debugging if you wish. One is to enable the program execution. One is to enable the scheduled backup that can be going on. Program execution or scheduled backup, when you change those, you would need to start and stop the server for which you change them. Deploy is pretty obvious. And so then this is the various properties that you can save. I do want to take just a moment now, and I'll reiterate it later on about versions in terms of the versions that you see in the servers within the PCT versus the versions you see in a live AS versus the version number that appears in the properties of the AS within the PCT. The version that's in the live AS is obviously determined entirely by the version that was stalled into that automation server by the device administrator. When you do a backup of that automation server and then use that to restore into the PCT, the version that actually shows up in the PCT is whatever version it was that was available for that major version when you installed the project configuration tool. In other words, you could take a backup from a 1.9.1.87 automation server and restore it into the PCT that happened to be built with the 1.9.1.253 template. And if you looked in the properties page from the PCT as to the version of that automation server, it would show 1.9.1.253. If you then made changes on it and did a backup from the PCT would show that it was done at version 1.9.1.253. And in fact, if you were to look at it using the analyzer tool available on the community site, it would also say that it was 1.9.1.253. But when you load it back into a live 1.9.1.87 device, then it reveals itself as So we may come back to that a little bit. It can get kind of confusing in the final operation. But let's take a look at another way of creating servers, which is by using a template. This is especially useful when you have a lot of very similar automation servers that are going to be on a project and that are similar to each other. And especially if they're similar to another automation server that you might have used on a different project. So you'll notice this plus sign inside of a folder. If we hover over it, it says create a new server from template. So I can click on that and it shows me a screen of templates that I have already created. If this is the one that I want to use, I can select it, or I could choose from and create a different template by giving it a different name and then browsing out on my PC to some other template location. And let's say I choose this one and say OK. Now I suddenly have another new template that's available to me. So for now, let's use this 1.8 template. Even though, as you recall, I have a 2.01 enterprise server. One of the great things about the PCT is it incorporates the capability of doing some upgrades. One thing I'd like to mention as in passing, this whole template process uses the method that was introduced in 1.6 of using a backup and creating new IDs for it. If you recall, when that was first added to the system, one of the rules was that the backup file could not have a BACnet interface because it's impossible to resolve the various IDs that are built into the backup file with a BACnet interface, so that's not permitted. Similarly, since that process is used within this creation from a template, your template cannot have a BACnet interface associated with it. And if you try to create a bunch of servers with a backup file that has a BACnet interface, the creation will fail and you'll get an error message that says that the template with BACnet interface is not supported. So having said that, we're going to use this for 1.8 template name. I'm going to create 5 different servers, and they all show up and they are given a default name. You can see they're all at 1.81, and then I can simply leave everything at default. They're all built as ASPs. You can select them all here, and choose to save. And I have to enter the password. You want all of the servers within a project to have the same admin password. That's important just in terms of ease of use and then ultimately for deployment. Notice that the OK button does not become available until after I have entered the password twice and they both match. I have the option to apply the same password to all of the ones that I have group selected. So I'll say OK, and the process of creating those servers will continue. The save will take a little bit longer when you use the template because there's an associated backup file that has to be restored. And so it goes through those various operations. You can see them underneath the operation statement there, starting and applying the template, changing the password, renaming, starting up the server after it's applied the template and the restore has been going on. Once they're fully started successfully, and then finally stopping all the servers again as you will. So the next step that we would proceed through here, since we used the template file that was at 1.8.1, will be to upgrade these template files to 2.01 to match the version that we really want. But before we do that, let's take a look at one of them to make sure that they have all the information that I want. I'll just take server 03 for the heck of it. Start it. You can either start it by right-clicking and choosing something from your drop-down list, or by clicking the right-facing arrow and start it. you'll see that the operation tells me it's waiting, it's starting, and then in a second here it'll start. Now this icon over here that looks like a little puzzle piece allows us to open the workstation. And when I open the workstation, one of the things you'll see is it opens the version 1.8 workstation. If you recall in the introduction, we indicated that you needed to have on your PCT client machine the workstation version for any of the version projects that you might use. So I use the password that I created within the server. The destination in terms of IP address and port number is selected already for me within the tool, and it shows up on my logon screen. So then I log on, deal with certificates. It logs into the virtual server, provides me with server 03, and you can see all of the information that was present in my template file. Various things, obviously it's dependent upon what you did for that project, but everything's there, which is what I wanted to confirm. So I will then close the workstation and stop the server, which again I can do with my drop down or from the icons up above. And I'll begin to choose upgrade, and I can upgrade in a group selection. Unfortunately, PCT doesn't allow me to skip versions when I upgrade the way we introduced within 1.9 for the other product, but it doesn't take too much time, and it's not such a hassle with upgrading virtual servers as it is with live servers. So we'll simply group select and upgrade it to 1.9.1. You can see the upgrading operation going on and displayed. If there were problems or if there's a success, you will get a report provided to you as you when they are done. One of the things that you might want to take an occasional look at as we're going through some of these different steps, you can see that the project memory usage that's shown in the upper part of the screen does in fact change when different things are going on with the servers. When the servers are started, it's greater than it is when the servers are stopped. And when different operations are going on, that project memory usage percentage will go up and down as you would expect it to do. So the upgrade process itself is now essentially complete. We're starting the server, going through some checks, and in a minute here it will be done, and it will report its information to us in the form of a status report, and what it was successful with upgrading and what it was not successful with upgrading. Okay, so the upgrade is now complete. It left the servers running. You can view the upgrade result by going under the information and clicking for more details. It gives you a full list. You get a sort of a benign warning error on one of them, but you can scroll down on everything that's here. And this is the same. We can delete that with that little X there. There's a similar means this information field will stay filled until you actively remove it, and the same is true for errors as well. So we can go to look at each one of these things and click that X to get rid of it. Just walk down the list here, just kind of clean things up. Okay, so now we have some 6 servers on our project, and they're not quite up to the revision that we want yet. So let's do another upgrade process, and I'm just going to go through the step here to upgrade. But I will, in the final video, the step process is exactly the same as it was from 1.9.1, and so we'll just do this, but I will delete the time from the video. So when I next get back to you, these will all show themselves as version 2.01. All right, so everybody's now been upgraded to 201. Let's create a couple of other servers just to have a few other different types. Let's make a, let's take an ASB36 and let's create an ASB24 and maybe an old classic AS. The AS down here as well. Okay, so we have those three new servers. We can group select them and right click. No, let's just group. We're gonna save them. We can right click and save them. So right click, save them, give them all the same password. Apply it, save them. They get started, they get renamed, then they get stopped again. And so they're all there. Everybody's at the right revision. And you'll notice that none of these are showing as having been added to the parent. So we want to add them to the parent. We can do that as a group, but first we need to group select the ones that have not yet been started and start those servers so that everybody's all running. Operation indicates that they're starting. Everybody's all started, so we can group select all of our automation server devices and right click and choose add to parent. And you'll notice that we have to have a password added, and you can see why it is so important or so much easier to have the same password throughout the entire project. So we'll enter the password, being applied to all, say OK. And you get various pieces of information underneath the servers as it goes through, adds the child server, stops the server, indicates that it's been added to a parent, indicates who the parent is, walks down through the list. Again, just for curiosities, you can also see how the project memory usage changes. You'll notice from the operational information display, there doesn't always seem to be any consistent order in terms of how they're added or specifically how long it takes to do it. I really don't think that there's any consistent amount of time that it takes per server. It's like it's a big operation. For example, it seems to be taking quite a while to add server 05 to the parent, but we'll wait until they're all done. One thing that you do need to remember is that after you have added it to the parent, if you wish to go work with it again, you do need to go and start it back up again. Okay, they've all been added to the parents. They're all stopped. They're all still group selected, so I'm going to start them all in one go. So I'll start all the ASs, and then we'll go take a look at them. So they're all started. I'm going to select the ES because you need to select which individual server you want to log on to. And then I'll start Workstation. Notice it chooses the Workstation 2.0 version. And I will give the password. And I can choose which type of workspace I want. In this case, I'll choose the engineering workspace. And you'll notice that I have server 01. We have a warm start showing for all of my other servers. So I'm just going to ignore them right now. It really doesn't make any difference. If I go down, I can look at my servers, see that they're all online. I can look at one of the servers I made from the template, and you can see, since I don't have any filter on my tree here, that all of those different things that I had for from the template are all there. If I look at the ones that I made, this was one of the ASBs. The property is, you can see the version in here somewhere, I'm sure. Product ID, check under general information. There it is right there. SmartX controller ASP36. This was a 24, and this was just the old classic automation server. So you can see that they don't have any of the things that we wanted, or they had all the things that we wanted. That's not correct. They are empty because they weren't made from a template. Okay, so this is those are the basics of how you create a project with a bunch of servers. Let's throw a little bit of a puzzle in here and just see how we might use the PCT. If we were just told that this is actually a campus project, it's going to have 2 enterprise servers and an enterprise central, and that some of the AS that we've already configured under this ES are not going to be on this ES. They're going to be on a different ES. So what kind of process would we need to go through to do that? Within the PCT itself, if we go back to the PCT, you'll notice that when you select these things, you can add them to the parent if they're not already added to a parent, but there's really no way to take them off of the parent. So we kind of have to, I kind of created a sort of a special way that you might go through this sort of unique problem that's been thrown at us. So let's go back to the logged in situation where we are here. And let's say we need to move one of the ASPs that use the template, we'll say server 5, and the ASP36, which was the which is server 7. Let's say that those are the 2 that we need to move to the new enterprise server. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to this server 5, and we're going to select it and do a backup of it. So backup, and we'll back it up. Same old processes you'd use for any backup. And then we're going to go into the system tree to our backup and restore. Our backup sets the local backup that we just made, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to say save this to, and save it to some location that I know of. Save that off, and then I will proceed to go through the same process with server 7, I believe was the one that I said was the ASB. Yeah, there it is. So I'm going to do a backup of that, which shouldn't take too long since we know it's empty. But this is obviously the same process you'd use if it were full. So close that, expand it, go down to my backup sets, find the one I want, save that to my same location. Save is done. Okay, there we go. And so now I've done a backup. I can go and I can stop the workstation and go back to the project itself, stop all my servers, and you can see the operation says stopping. Doesn't take too long to stop them. Everybody's stopped, and sometimes it takes the ES a little bit longer to stop than it does the others. I'm not quite sure why that is. But one of the things that is that we're going to be doing next, okay, so now I'm going to delete server 5. Right click, delete, give it the password. And it said it failed to delete it. Why did it fail to delete it? We look at our error message. The parent server must be running to delete it. Oh, I'd forgotten that process. So let's get rid of my error message again with the X. Start the parent server. And choose that, and then choose delete. And say OK. And it's gone. And now I also wanted to do the same to server 7. And choose delete. enter my password. And it's gone. So now I'm going to start all these servers again. And I'm just going to do a quick check and see what the enterprise server thinks it has and doesn't think it has. Because in the event that for some reason the enterprise server itself doesn't see those things as having been deleted, then when you try and add it into a system, even if it's under another enterprise server, you won't be successful because you can't have the same name. You can't have two servers with the same name. So I've deleted those servers, confirmed that there's nobody left back in the ES. And so now I'm going to make a new server. I'm going to make a new enterprise server. New enterprise server, and I'm going to call this very creatively my new enterprise server. And we'll create that. And so now I'm going to create a new ASP, and we'll call this my new ASP. Creativity is just extraordinary, isn't it? Now I'll create another one, and guess what we'll call this? We'll call this the new ASB36, and we'll make it an ASB36. Okay, so we've added all of them, and now we'll create a new EC, but we'll call it Central Server. And create the EC. So now I've created the EC. So let's save them all, remembering to provide the same password that we have in all the other servers, since these are all part of the same project. Okay, they're all there. Now let's start them all. And now they're all started. So let's log on to the ASP first. Log on. And you can see the new ASP. There's nothing there, so we need to restore the file. So we're going to restore. If you remember, the ASP was server 05, so we need to get server 05. And we need to remember to restore it with new IDs. This is critical. Since this is going to be under a different enterprise server, it has to be done with new IDs or you'll have a big mess. So we're going to restore that, and we definitely do want to restore. So it automatically logs us off. That's as expected. And within the process here, we'll close down Workstation. And you can see that as part of the restoration, what always happens is that it will also stop the server after the restore. So we need to return to the project, start the ASP again. And once it's started, we will open up Workstation. And as you may recall, and then again you may not, part of the process of restoring with new IDs is also the reset of the admin password. So you'll need to log on with the default admin password, and then the system will immediately request that you change it, and then you change it back to that same password that we used for all of the other servers within our project. So we log back on, and see what comes up. Choose our workspace, and here's our server with all of the objects in it that we expected. So we're going to kill this workstation again and follow the same process for the ASB, which is currently started. So we want to talk to the ASB. I could have just logged off and logged back onto the ASB, but it's got a different port number and everything else like that. So it's just easier to kill the workstation, choose my project, log into it. And when it comes up, it's pretty tough to tell that it's got the new restore thing in it, which it doesn't, because it's empty, but it was empty before. But I'm still going to go through the same steps that we had, because in reality you probably wouldn't have that same kind of situation. So I import that backup set, and then I select it, choose restore. I forgot, and fortunately the system reminds me, do I want to continue? No, I don't. I want to restore configuration with new IDs, and then restore it. Yes, I do now want to restore it. It logs me off automatically. I kill my workstation, confirm after the restoration. My server has been stopped. Select it, start it up again, and then log in. And it's important that you follow the login process, because remember, after I've restored it, it's reset the admin password, so the PCT itself would not have been able to talk to it until the password was changed to what the password is for all of the other servers in the project. There we go. All set, logged in, choosing a new workspace, confirmation that it has everything in it that I expected, which essentially is nothing. And so that is now done. I will stop my workstation, go back to my project. I have my new enterprise server and my new automation servers all in operation and running. So I select my two automation servers and I choose to add them to parent. And in this case, I'm adding them to a different parent. I'm not adding them to server 01. I'm adding them to the new ES. And you'll notice the drop-down list only shows me enterprise servers as available as a parent, because that's all that I'm allowed to do. Add the password. And the adding to parent process begins. And you can see that it now shows that it's been added to the parent. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to add my two ESs to the EC. And so I can add them to parent. It automatically picks central server, since that's the only EC there is. That's the only EC. We only support one EC. Add the password. And the process begins. And in all cases, it adds the child and then stops the server after that addition process. Now it goes through several things while it adds the child ESs. One of the things that happens is, as I briefly mentioned earlier, is it will confirm that there are no two servers in the system as a whole that have the same name. That's not permitted. Every server under each of the ESs must have a unique name. It will also go through to try and determine if any of the enterprise servers actually have the same Gooood as another one does, because that is not permitted. We think that that will be a very rare occurrence. If it does, the addition of the enterprise server will fail, and you would need to contact product support to help unwind that situation. That's the kind of situation that would have occurred if you had used the backup of an enterprise server to create a second enterprise server, and then at some point down the road decided to add those two enterprise servers to the same enterprise central. Not a common occurrence, but not an impossible occurrence. Okay, everybody's got a parent now. You can see that the enterprise servers both say that they're a child of the central server. Each of the automation servers has its own individual parent. Let's select all of the servers that are not currently running and tell them to start. And so now they're going to start, and we'll log into the central server and see what life looks like from the central server's point of view. And you'll notice that when we're given an option of the workspaces, the engineering with custom types is not available, since custom types are not supported underneath the Enterprise Central, at least not within version 2.0. So we'll choose engineering, and you can see here we are at the central server. Underneath the central server, we have 2 enterprise servers. Underneath the 2 enterprise servers, we have the 2 that we removed from the initial enterprise server and the 6 that were remaining. You know, at this point, you can pretty much create anything. You can do pretty much anything that you can do in a live server, you can do in a virtual server. So I could go to my ASB36 and I could create a new folder just the same way you would any other folder. And when I selected that folder, I could create let's just create a value object, call it AV for analog value, create it, choose it, duplicate it, make 10 of them. Okay, same old kind of things that you could do anywhere. I could create an interface. I can create a BACnet interface if I wanted to, any of the interfaces. So, you know, I mean, it's pretty straightforward interface here. I can create the BACnet interface. Choose to just create that with the default. So there's my interface. Underneath the interface, I can create the wrong thing selected there. I can create a new MSTP network. Defer the assignment, and then underneath the network I can create all my various supported MSTP devices. So it's pretty clear I can do all kinds of things like that. I can create I could create on my ASP, I could create a Infinet interface. You can find it here, there it is. And then underneath the Infinet interface, I can create a new Infinet network. And then underneath my Infinet network, I could create whatever Infinet devices I might want to create. And then I can do programming on them. Offline, virtual server, easy to do. I can go so far as to create a on my BACnet IP network here, I can create new MP series devices, and MPC 18A, for example. And then I could go in and I can start to do whatever programming I might want to do on the new MPC devices and create the various new things that I can with that. So as you can see, you can do all the creation that you needed to do, what you can do in a live system, you can do in the virtual system. Let's do another little test here. I can go into my folder here and create a new program. I'm going to create a new script program. So I'll create that, and I'm on my what am I on? My new ASB36. Now I'm going to show something here that may be an example of something that we didn't have to do on this system, but let's try and edit it. Let's see what happens. So when I try and edit this program with the script editor, you'll notice it comes up with this big blank screen here. And when this first happened to me, I was quite distressed. I didn't know what the problem was. But then I found out what the problem was, is that even though, as I mentioned to you earlier, I no longer had to turn off my firewall to talk to my servers within PCT, I found that I did have to turn off my firewall to allow my Let's make sure it's off here. McAfee, quick settings, firewall is off. Go back to my script program, choose to edit. So for whatever reason, the firewall itself prevents the script editor from talking to the server. Don't know why, but it does. So here we're going to have the program. We're going to set, well, let's call this AV1. So we're going to set AV1 equal to second. Save it. Save is successful. We'll close the editor, go back to the script program, edit the bindings, bind AV1 as the output to that script program, save it. And now I'm going to go back to my folder here and I'm going to look at the watch window and I'm going to pull AV1 down into the watch window and I'm going to see that it's just sitting there at 0. Well, if you remember correctly, part of the thing within the PCT was that the programs were disabled. But we do have the option to enable them. So let's get out of Workstation here, go back to the new ASB36, look on my properties page, and choose Enable Program Execution, and then save that. And you'll notice the error message that I get that says the restart of the new ASB36 is needed for the values to apply. So I'll stop this, stopping the server. Server is stopped. I'll restart the server. It says it started. Now you'll notice that the informational error message does not disappear by itself. You need to go in and get rid of it. I like to do that just for good housekeeping. So let me go back to log into the central server. And we're back here. All of our servers are up and running. Everybody's online. Let's see if it saved my watch window. It did, and you can see that now the programs are executing. So that's what enabling programs can do. Obviously, you want to keep track of which ones you've enabled and which ones you haven't, just because it's probably good housekeeping practice not to leave them running. It takes up resources. So I'm going to delete this from my watch window so it doesn't stay in there. Kill my workstation. Be a good boy and disable my programs and save that. Need to start it and stop it, but that doesn't really matter so much anyhow. So I'm going to close this project. First thing you want to do when you close a project is to stop all the programs. And what we're going to do now is to show how we might use the PCT to maintain copies of a project in the office, to make some ongoing changes to that project, and then deploy those changes to the PCT. So we're almost done stopping here. Notice how the project memory usage has dropped dramatically since we have stopped all of these servers. It was up around 14–15%, I think, something along those lines. It's always good practice to keep your servers all stopped before you close projects. It's always good practice to close all the projects before you shut down the PCT. Sometimes you'll find that things are left running in the background, which can interfere with the overall operation because it simply doesn't free up the resources. Okay, so now let's see how we can use the PCT to make copies of a project in the office, or to make some ongoing changes. We'll say that we have a project that's a single AS project that's currently in operation, and we're going to call this the field project, and leave everything else at default. Save the field project. Goes through the process of saving it and opening it. Our project has been saved. We can add our single ASP server. We're going to add one server. It's going to be an ASP. We're going to give it the same name as the one in the field, which I know is AS_242. And so now we'll save that. Give it the password. Okay, starting it, renaming it, and stopping it. Okay, now I'm going to log on to the live automation server, which is located at this IP address here. I think I might have made a typo. And you'll be able to see that this has a certain amount of programming in it, and it's got has a BACnet interface, Modbus, schedule, a few things here and there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a backup file from this. So I'm going to do a backup right now of the configuration. I don't think there's too much in there. I don't think this will take too long, and we're not doing any of the historical data, which can often take quite a bit of time for the backup. So their backup's done. Now I want to go down to the local backup set and save that to my location. Saving it off. And so now I've done that. I'm going to stop Workstation and go back to my PCT, start my AS inside the PCT. Okay, log onto it with Workstation. There's the name, nothing in it. Choose to restore, import my backup set, and there it is right there. Select it. I don't want new IDs. It's the same project, so I definitely want to continue in this case. And I do want to restore. So it says it was successful, but I know that part of the restoration process within the PCT is that it's going to end up with leaving my server stopped. So I will start the server again, go back into Workstation, talk to that server within the PCT. And I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to add a new folder with a bunch of new values in it. Give a new multi-state value. It really doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you can do this 100 times or a few times or whatever you want. Duplicate function, such a nice fun thing to use. I'll just use that some more. Okay, so we've made some changes here, and so we're all set. And so then let's shut down the Workstation. Those changes have been made to my automation server. So now I can select that automation server and I can supply it with the on-site IP address, which is 10.169.94.242, and I can save it. Need the restart to apply, so I'll now stop it. Get rid of my error message. Start it. See that it's still there. Choose deploy. And here you need to specify what was the username and password that was used to engineer it, and what's the similar administrative capability user on the live system. So I can choose apply to all, but there's only one, so it doesn't really matter. So then we can say deploy. It does a process of backing up, transferring the backup. Get all these things called out within the operational field of the properties there. Restarting the server in the field. Restoring the automation server in the field. And then it's done. So let's go back to the automation server in the field and confirm that it did what we wanted it to do. So we'll log on, put in the IP address 10.169.94.242, log on, and we log on to our AS and we see our new folder with all our multi-state values. So you can see that everything is done and all of the values have been changed. So that's a very useful way to keep projects up to date in your office, to know that you're matching what's going on in the field, make subsequent changes. Of course, you have to remember that when you deploy them, you're restoring the whole server. So there is some site disruption that takes place. So one other thing that is sometimes useful, I'm going to do a little cleanup here, stop my servers, shut down my project. But when you're working with the PCT, sometimes it's useful to know where your files are and what you can do with it, how you can move them around, how you can change different groups of projects. So what I'm going to show you now, I'll shut down the project configuration tool, and let's go to where all of our projects are located within the system. So if you recall, I mentioned that from my personal PC, everything is being stored under Schneider Electric Struxureware, because when I first installed the PCT, that's where things went. Since the new rebranding campaign, everything is done under Schneider Electric EcoStruxure. And if when you install PCT, it's PCT 2.0 is the first time you've done it, then this would be under EcoStruxure. If you've done it previously, it's under Struxureware. And then under there, building operation. And then under there, the project configuration tool. And then under there, you'll see the storage module. If I go to the storage module, you can see projects. Some other ones, projects old, projects video old. These are ones that I have done in the past. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this, because it's what I had before. I'm going to rename this projects video. And I'm going to create a new projects folder. New folder called projects. So now if I go and I start my PCT, there it is with no projects. So let's shut down the PCT. Maybe I want to look at a group of projects that I'd made previously that I had stored on my own. We'll call it, this must be the projects old. So this I need to give it a different name, and then go to my projects old and call it projects. restart my PCT. And there's a whole bunch of projects I'd made before. Let's look at this one. I'm going to open it up. And one of the things I'm going to do when I open this up is show you another little labor saver when you have kind of a large project, a large list of projects. When you have a large list of servers within a project. It can be kind of a nuisance to have to walk through a long group of servers and enter all of their different engineering, or not engineering, but live IP addresses. If we pull out the Properties tab here and we group select all of our servers and we put our cursor in the on-site IP address, at that point you can open an Excel spreadsheet that has your IP addresses in it, and simply select all of the IP addresses from the Excel spreadsheet, and then go to your project, and with your cursor inside that global IP address, paste the addresses, and it didn't go. Let's see, let me try that. There they are. So it did go. You just don't see them until after you're done with the pasting. So you put the cursor on the on-site IP address, you hit paste or Control V on my machine, click outside, and they're all there, and then you can save them with all of those IP addresses. So it's a quick little labor-saving way of doing things. I'm not going to save them because that's not. Oh, but I did just save them, didn't I? So let me get back to them and delete them. So that's all of what we're going to be doing live. I have a few other small things to go over to wrap things up in the slides. So let's go back to the slide view. So that's live. Let's review a couple of things. One of the things I did want to get back to the version issues, because it can get confusing when you look in a live AS and it has a particular build number next as the final digits of the version. The version that's in the live AS is the version that it has. The version that's listed in the PCT is really not terribly important. The PCT is designed to enable you to have the capabilities, but the versions that are going on within the different hotfixes that are changes to the plugins that are already disabled within the PCT really are not that terribly applicable. I mean, there may be some hotfixes that come along for a PCT application problem. That's a different story, but don't get confused by a mismatch, it seems, of the versions that you see when you see it in the live, when you see it in the PCT, when you look at the backup file from the live via the analyzer tool, or you look at the backup file from the PCT within the analyzer tool. Remember, you have basic operations when you're creating projects. You have a local installation. You can have more than one project open at a time, but you continue to use memory until the servers are shut down and the project is closed. You can't copy directly from one project to another. You can use import and export to put the different objects inside. If you're running a server installation, there's no real locking that takes place in terms of preventing an engineer from trying to edit the same projects at the same time. It's the same as if those servers were located under an enterprise server or enterprise central in a live system. You can see what the different engineers may be doing by looking at the event logs as you could in the live, but there's really no other way to tell. If you have a problem with the PCT, what will be asked of you by product support will be to provide them with files that can show what went wrong. And the way you gather those files is by going to the project configuration tool within the program files, which would be program file x86, then Schneider Electric, either Struxureware or EcoStruxure, as we've said before, building operation, project configuration tool. Locate the executable called log collector. When you run that, it will create a zip file that it will put on your desktop that can then be delivered to product support to help you with any problems that you might have. In terms of compatibility, you can create B3 devices, all the values that you want. If you want to have those value objects to have a specific value when you deploy, then you need to make sure that the Setpoint attribute on those objects has been set to true. Script properties will show things that indicate that they're offline. When you enable the programs, you're not enabling the programs in the field devices, you're simply enabling them in the AS. The Inet interface is not supported. Laun works you can make, MNBs and MNLs you can work on with some certain restrictions. You cannot do anything with smart drivers. You can do a certain number of things with Network 8K. And when you have the project configuration tool as the target for any of the SDK activities, you probably need to install a temporary certificate since that's what that needs in order to communicate with the PCT. That is it on the PCT. I hope this is helpful in letting you get used to the product and starting to use it. It's extremely powerful. It's a great way to be able to test things, to be able to build things in advance, and to be able to keep up to date with your projects in the field.